You're listening to Rein It In with Ash and Josh.
Ready. Welcome back to the Rein It In podcast with Ash and Josh. Today, we have a very special guest. Joining us, Katie Pinn. Katie is a therapist and psychological coach who is passionate about providing accessible mental health and psychological assistance to athletes. As a registered member of the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy and the British Psychological Society, Katie brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to her work. What makes Katie's perspective even more unique is her personal experience as an equestrian. With a deep understanding of the challenges faced by riders, Katie has a particular interest in supporting equestrians in their mental well-being. We're excited to delve into the world of integrative sports coaching with Katie and learn how she helps riders overcome obstacles, builds confidence and reach their full potential. Welcome, Katie.
Welcome, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so qualified that intro entailed some big words
that I didn't understand what meant.
We rehearsed that 5 times before doing it and still managed to get it wrong. Thank you for coming on, Katie.
You're welcome.
So, Katie, could you tell us a little bit more about your personal journey as an equestrian and how it influenced your decision to start integrative sports coaching, and tell us a little bit about what integrative sports coaching is?
Okay, so where to start? So with riding, I don't come from a working class background or any privilege or an equestrian family at all. I grew up in a council estate, quite poor, and to be able to ride, I basically had a friend who had horses. Very luckily, they would allow me to go ride. I'd help out during the week to get a ride on a Saturday. So that's how I started from a very young age. Didn't have any formal lessons. It was get on, stay on the horse if you can.
Yeah, throw you in at the deep end.
Very, very wild youngsters. Just get on, stay on, crack on. And that was that, started going out, doing a bit of show jumping. Through my friend again, very lucky. But it was sort of my teenage years, I really started to lose my confidence quite badly. I was really badly bullied in school. I had quite a hard upbringing. My parents were quite ill, I was a young carer. So it was quite difficult for me. And everyone sort of saw me as someone that was really confident. Whack the jump up, Katie will do it. Naughty youngster, Katie will get on it. But it was all really false. And I feel like my whole identity throughout my teenage years was really, really false. Really false.
Probably, I imagine it probably took you quite a deep sense of searching to find out who the truth of you is. I feel like this is going to be a good podcast because there's a lot of relatability on a lot of ends on that. So you would get from the horses side, it was people would throw you in as the one that would just get on anything because you had like this not false sense of confidence, but that was the character, if you will, like you was on stage that you portrayed to everyone, and you almost got stuck doing that.
Yeah. And when I did start to really lose my confidence, there was a lot of avoidance. I didn't want to ride. I gave up for a while because I just couldn't admit to anyone that I was struggling, that I was scared of just getting on or riding or jumping. And that started happening at around 15 for me. I didn't ride for a while. I had quite a few bad falls. I got quite injured. And I just completely, there was no one to help, no one I could talk to. So I gave up. I gave up for quite a big period. Was
there like one, if you go back, and it sounds like it was over like a period of incidents or falls or scenarios, is there one that you can almost pinpoint and go, there was a shift there that the light bulb started clicking to it for you?
Yeah, so I think it started, my first sort of pony that I had that I loaned, I didn't own because we couldn't afford that. He colicked and died, and I got another horse, an ex-racer. It was a little bit crazy, and I had quite a few bad falls, went through jumps quite a few times. Every time I tried to compete, it would either go really well and I'd win, or I would get eliminated almost immediately, or come off, or something bad would happen. No one was really helping me at the yard either. It was just, people make jokes or just don't take it really seriously, crack on with it, get on with it. And then, because there was no one helping, I did just give up.
So would you say there that it sounds like there was a lack of a mentor in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, because my parents weren't that active in my horsey world. They tried. They went to a couple of shows or would turn up at the yard occasionally, but there was no one there. I didn't feel like there was anyone really in my corner or willing to help me. I couldn't afford lessons. So I was quite stuck at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine it. It really sounds like you went through a lot during your sort of teenage years, but then I can imagine this played a big part in leading to you where you are now as a person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I carried on riding after a couple of years. I actually bought my first horse after working. Saved up the money, bought a kind of wild youngster for £1,000.
It's a good job you was put on all those naughty horses. You went, actually, I can get a naughty one myself and a young one, and I have some confidence to ride it.
Yeah, definitely. That's all I could afford, so got it, cracked on. And again, things were just very up and down. Still confidence issues going on with just me as a person. I didn't like myself particularly. Chronic perfectionism, people pleasing, all of these things going on. Really high achiever, and I was pushed to do quite well, like academically and in anything I did, whether that was sports or school, whatever it was. But horses were always really, really important to me, and I didn't want to give them up. So I kept trying to continue, but when you've got these patterns of behaviour, they're always going to trip you up. They always will. And it got to a point in my early 20s again, wasn't riding, really scared again, didn't want to continue. And at university, my mental health really started plummeting till it got to the point where probably my lowest point was I was quite scared I was going to fail. I didn't fail. I did quite well.
Pardon?
But in my head, I thought I was going to fail.
Yeah. And
I had too many responsibilities. I always said yes to everything and took on too much, probably a big coping mechanism. And I'd had therapy a couple of times in my own life at that point already. And my lowest point was I really was like, if I fail university, the thought of letting down my family and myself, I had a suicide plan. I was going to end it. I was really, really not in a good place.
Wow. What did you go to study at university?
Psychology.
Right, okay. So it's such an interesting journey in which you've gone on, because in which you are paralleling having to learn about psychology, yet the psychology behind yourself as well. It must have been quite a almost out of body experience to a certain degree, because you're in what would I assume be in a very unique perspective of knowing on paper why the human brain does certain things, yet you yourself are having bouts of mental health and identity issues, potentially imposter syndrome as well.
Massively.
And were you able to utilize the psychology that you were learning on yourself at all, or was it very different? Like when like you're in a relationship, or your mate's in a relationship, and her boyfriend's treating her like trash, and you're just like, girl, leave him. You deserve yourself, queen, slay. And they're like, no way. And then you're in the same situation, and they're like, your boyfriend's treating you like trash, leave him. You're like, yeah, but I love him. It's so hard. It's so easy to give the advice. Was it that sort of scenario for you, that it was really easy to sort of talk about the psychology that you were learning about to other people and not really implement it for yourself?
I think it's always harder to do it when you're looking for your own perspective. It kind of clouds everything and sort of distorts how you see the situation and your own world. It really does. And going sort of back to therapy and having someone else help me through that was a big game changer for me. And it took years to work through my own stuff, but I was also able to, once somebody else started me on my healing journey, start implementing everything that I was learning and that into my riding as well, and actually going, you know what, it's not just keep cracking on or keep having riding lessons, I needed to sort out my mindset towards riding, figure out what I was actually scared of, why I was scared, how I was going to get around that. And then doing that is what enabled me to carry on and do what I love. Very much the practical side of it wasn't enough. I had to get the help I needed from somebody else, but also help myself.
I've spoken openly about my journey in therapy as well. But looking back on yours, what was it through that process that helped you overcome that obstacle that you were struggling with? Or obstacles, should I say?
Many things. I don't think I could pinpoint it to just one, but really getting to grips with what I believed about myself and maybe why I believed it. Like those deep core beliefs of thinking that I'm not good enough, that I'm never going to be enough, or that I have to be perfect to deserve love or belonging or whatever it's going to be. To work through those and actually be able to see myself that I am enough as just a person, just a human being. I don't need to be extraordinary. That really helped me unpick those perfectionistic tendencies and coping strategies.
Yeah, I can imagine that was a lot to deal with and manage at such a sort of young age, and you were still learning so much. So it's amazing to hear the journey that you've been on, but then explain to everyone that's listening that how did you then end up becoming a therapist?
Okay, so most therapists will have been through therapy themselves. You have to have had therapy to become a therapist, and
I never knew that. That's really interesting.
Yes, yeah, you have to have worked on yourself. You can only take your clients as far as you've taken yourself. So it's really, really important that you're not going into being a therapist with your own emotional baggage. You've worked through it. But yeah, most of the people who become therapists have had therapy, seen it works, seen it's benefited them, and then wanted to do that.
Okay, that does make sense. I guess, yeah, from someone who has no idea, that completely adds up. So, like you say, you've been through therapy, you've then now are a therapist. What made you, did you go straight into like focusing on athletes or? Okay.
No. So I've gone a really roundabout way, to be fair, to do what I do. I went into psychology literally just because I was good at it at school. I found it interesting. Got into my university course, went off and did it. Then I did some counselling and psychology units, found it really interesting. Obviously, I'd had my own therapy. Then I went off after I graduated and did quite a few different things. I worked in psychiatrics.
If you're listening or watching, I don't actually, basically, I had a slight technical issue, and I don't really know what we're talking about. I know what we were talking about. We could have been talking about it for 25 minutes and we wouldn't have known if Josh hadn't looked at recording side.
I think it works well if we go on to what are some of sort of the challenges that equestrians face when it comes to sort of their mental well-being.
So one of the big ones that I see when I work with riders, people are very much reaching out to me for a variety of reasons, but because they're seeing that I do therapy as well, is trauma. So trauma is one of those words which is thrown around quite a lot now, but anything can essentially be trauma. We can have big T trauma, which is, the horrific accidents that somebody might have, or say assault. Then we've also got little t trauma, which is more like a general day-to-day adversity and things in childhood that were quite unpleasant, perhaps. And with trauma, something like a big riding accident, it's going to be registered by the brain the same as a car crash. It's really, really traumatic. It's going to leave a lasting effect, which is then going to create those fear responses, make somebody really scared of riding, make them want to stop doing it, just like it did for me. And mean they can't progress in their sport anymore because they can't ride the way they want to because, their body won't let them, their mind won't let them. So trauma is a big thing that riders come to me with.
Have you found any difference or any similarities between amateur riders and professional riders?
I will say professional riders no one gets to the top without, having a few accidents, without having to go through adversity or struggle to some extent. So riders at the top of the sport do tend to be more resilient to those who are, say, amateurs. And sometimes being at the top of the sport always makes you in quite a privileged position. Maybe you've gone through less hardship in your life. You've had maybe, riding-wise, you can still have those troubles, but in your life, maybe things aren't as stressful day to day. So with the riders that are amateurs, it tends to be a lot of their personal life gets brought into the sessions and when I work with them. Because, we're not just horse riders. We are people. Mm-hmm. And if we are stressed out day to day, we are struggling in our work, in our personal life, our relationships, that is all going to play an effect on what's going on when you get on the horse. Things completely unrelated to riding can have a big effect. So I do tend to find that amateur riders do struggle more.
Yeah, because I imagine, horses are so acutely attuned to emotion. It's no different to what we've spoken about previously with how a horse will respond to how you are, what you are projecting. So with that, I'd imagine you look at, the lifestyle that amateur riders live to professional riders, each and have their own different struggles. But I think there are probably more of a diversity of struggles with amateur riders. So when you're coming on, you're not just thinking about, okay, work in the yard and where am I going to jump next in which lovely country. You're probably thinking about relationships, how other bills you've got playing out, another job or a two streams of income, because life's hard for everyone at the moment, and then trying to then fund your horse. And I imagine there's quite a lot more that they bring to the table of having to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. Especially say if you are like a rider, you're a happy hacker, and then something goes wrong, you have an accident, something happens that's quite traumatic. You necessarily you didn't have the skills to begin with in your riding to be out sort of doing high level dressage or competing or jumping, and you don't have those to bring back to the table. If you've already got skills in the bank, that's going to help you with your riding.
So almost the riding capability of the person actually helps them overcome potential obstacles. That makes a lot of sense, because I myself did a lot with young horses and naughty horses, and I had some quite bad falls along the way, but I never lost my confidence because of it. I was quite lucky, maybe naive, probably definitely, but I think that worked to my advantage in that situation. Regarding people that have come to you, has it been more male or female dominated? Female. That doesn't surprise me, unfortunately.
No, that's the thing. Men don't tend to reach out for help.
It's why I've been such an advocate of talking about my journey. I actually posted about this on Instagram the other day. The hand around my throat, which is quite an original and unique tattoo that everyone sort of tells me regularly, was, for me, part of me overcoming panic attacks. So therapy hugely helped that. But for me, I'm weird with my tattoos. They always have a...
Don't say they always have a meaning, because you've shown me some photos of, I'm getting this tattoo, comes back with that. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, funny.
Yeah.
So some of your...
But for sort of traumatic experiences, I do use a tattoo when I've sort of overcome it.
Good symbolism.
Yeah. And my when I've spoken to my therapist about it, I did it without even really knowing. He was the one that sort of brought it up to me. He almost told me do you remember I spoke to you and he was like, you should take a photo of all your tattoos and put them on the floor and try and work out if there's some sort of story behind it or...
Yeah, very, very like a terrifying old witch's tale horror movie. What is with the predominantly your client base predominantly being women? What is something that these female equestrians that are coming to you? What is their sort of main? What is a common link between them all that you find?
Low self-confidence and self-worth.
Is that an equestrian thing or is that a female thing? I obviously don't know because I'm not a female, so I can't link the two.
I would say it's something that's quite a running theme with women. Definitely. Not everybody, but I very rarely meet a truly confident woman.
Why is that?
I don't know if it's the expectations that you have as a woman, that you need to be polite, you need to be quite a good girl, you need to be really respectful of others, and it's hard to, all these different roles you have to play. And definitely there are times when I think maybe you dull down your shine a little bit.
Right.
Because you don't want to be then on the other end of the spectrum, you're cocky or bossy or bitchy because you are outspoken and confident.
It's almost like, you can't win either. Is there
No.
a certain age range in which that is that, I assume it's probably going to be between sort of late teens into the 20s, or does that go on to further than that age bracket?
Definitely further. I've worked with people into their 70s. I've worked with quite a wide range of people. But I think definitely, almost like I was saying with myself, like that false sense of self that you create. Being a teenager and trying to find yourself is hard enough as it is without having all the expectation of pressure as to what you're meant to be. And all these stereotypical roles that you're meant to play up to.
Looking back, say, 100 years, obviously, mental health probably wasn't a thing or was very rarely even spoken about. Do you think there was less of an issue back then and it's harder now because of the way society's evolved? Or was it just one of those things that it just wasn't spoken about, so it wasn't really a thing to even be concerned about?
Oh, it was definitely there. I think it's always been there, but it wasn't spoken about. But definitely in the modern world now, and like you said, the way society is, it is overwhelming. Like the reason everyone is so stressed and anxious is because like our whole nervous system is essentially how it was when we were like cave people. We are not built to deal with the modern world.
No.
Like we cannot handle and process that amount of information. It is overwhelming. We are meant to live traditionally in communities. People are meant to help us with, the jobs and the roles.
It was like 150 people.
I was just about to go, big up Jim Galvin, I'm about to come back with this one. Please tell me we're still recording, thank God for that.
I can't remember.
Drop some facts, Carl.
Something theory.
150 communities.
Yeah, but basically it was say that we should have been like I can't remember what it's called.
It's all right, I've got us. So we should, from caveman era going through historic times, we would live in communities of roughly about 150 people. One to do with disease, famine and all the rest of it, but we only really needed to survive with that variant of number to sort of be productive as a society. So I can sort of gauge where, especially with the female aspect, where their like comparison and self-worth comes from, is whereas at most you might see potentially everyone in your village of 150 people, you're comparing yourself to 150 people, whereas now you can go online and you could be comparing yourself to like 2 million people in a day, and it's like, where do I stand? And especially as a woman, you've got there's so much stigma. We do a lot for men, but we don't highlight that there's a lot of shit being a woman. And it's difficult when your comparison is to everyone else. And like as lads, we have some sort of comparison in terms of like, do I put a filtered abs on that or something? But we don't care about how do our eyebrows look, how does our skin look, how does my hair, how does that. There's so many different elements to being a woman, I'd imagine, that you end up comparing against on top of the amount of people you're already comparing to.
Well, we're set up to compare. And like you were saying, we were made to compare ourselves against, the few beautiful women in the tribe to compete with mates, not millions of people on the internet and the world's most beautiful people. Say riding up the world's most talented people that we compare ourselves to.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you I very much grew up in the age of women's magazines, constantly celebrity shaming going on. Oh, someone's got cellulite, you know, big words on the magazine, big picture of their cellulite, you know, you're fat, you're this, you're that.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. Like, you're not allowed to be too skinny. You're not allowed to be too big. You can't be this, you can't be that. It's just the expectations and the comparison are rife.
When it comes to like the therapy side of it and psychology, in terms of this sport, it's already been implemented in top football teams, and also now I think some rugby teams and the Premiership, where they actually have their team therapist to go through, and you see it quite frequently, especially at like high-end corporations. They have a corporate therapist which sort of discusses predominantly work-related topics, not so much the personal topics, but in the corporate side of it, they do it to optimize their performance when they're working in stocks or a recruitment, stuff like this. Like, really high-end. If you've got a company that's got a therapist on call, you're in the right place. And I think statistically they found in the football teams, I can't remember the exact thing, but statistically it was a lot higher in terms of their performance, because they've been able to channel what their emotions are when performing. And those emotions that are there subconsciously, just sort of at the surface that you don't realise. Take a footballer, for example. You are going to take a penalty, and you may not be thinking of the anxiety you're feeling because you're in front of thousands of people. That anxiety may be as a trigger to something else, then to something else, then to something else. And that's why you potentially are in a situation that you might miss that penalty kick. That when they go and see these therapists, they actually manage to dilute what they are thinking about and why, that when it comes to it, they really aren't thinking about it. So in the moment, they don't really know they're thinking about it, but the action of not going to the therapist is still there. So when they go see it, the action of being able to perform better is instead. So with that context, getting to the question I was going to ask, with this industry, how do you think that it would help top riders if they are looking to optimize their riding and competitive career to have essentially a team therapist that they would use?
Right, I think it would massively help. It would be beneficial to anyone. But yeah, top athletes could definitely benefit. Like I said, every other sport is utilizing it. You know, some equine teams do have therapists.
Oh, they do, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first I heard. So when did they start having some on teams?
I know, I can't remember the team now, but I know, like even like 5 years ago, this was a thing, but it's quite rare.
Yeah.
It's quite rare. But it's so beneficial in the sport, because what you kind of were describing there was the whole like difference between the inner and the outer game.
Okay.
So if you've essentially in your mind, you can decide if you've won or lost already before whether you're going to do dressage or eventing or show jump, whatever you're doing. If you are going into that either with everything else in your life sort of running through your mind, or you are very anxious, you are thinking, you know, what if that goes wrong? What if that happens? You are psyching yourself out. Maybe you are self-sabotaging, or you're self-critical, perfectionism, any of these things, they're going to come into play. But you can already lose in your mind. Because if you go into the ring with that mentality, then you are not focusing in the present. You are not 100% paying attention to what you need to be doing. And there's so much research now that even the language we use is so important. Like most of the time, if someone goes into the ring, say show jumping, they go, oh, I don't want to fall off, I don't want to have a stop or elimination there. That's the fence, but that's going to happen. It is. There's something around sort of the language we use. And there was a really interesting study done, actually. It was a staircase in a workplace, and people walking up and down it normally. And then they put some bright yellow tape and a big sign saying don't trip. Suddenly the vast majority of people going up that staircase are tripping.
That's crazy.
Is that because they're thinking of tripping and then
It puts it into your mind, but the way sort of thoughts formulate, it uses pictures. So your mind doesn't know what like a negative is, like a don't. So you're going to form an image of your brain of that happening. So in this example, tripping, or your horse refusing, or you falling off. So if you're going, oh, I don't want that to happen, you've got an image of that happening. It's more likely to happen. And that's how you've already lost before you've started. But there are so many things that are going to trip people up. And I think anyone from the bottom of the sport to the top is going to have the benefit from, say, sports psychology or therapeutic work.
Yeah, it's very similar. It sounds very similar to like manifestation and like their visualization and stuff like that. It sounds like they could go hand in hand with each other. Like if you from an early days, like you have a vision board of these are what I'm going to set out to do in the career, this is what I'm going to do, etc. Or no different to I'm going to go into the ring and I'm manifesting this will be a good round. I will do that. It's going to help.
We've been doing that for years, visualization of like when I was doing the national training back when I was 12, 13, and we had a sports psychologist in helping us. And the whole premise was visualization of your test.
Yeah, it's important.
And that is it. Show jumpers do it as well. Visualizing, they'll go walk the course and then visualize you jumping that course. So you've already gone in and you're almost already prepared for everything that's going to come.
Yeah, definitely. It's mental rehearsal, but like scientifically speaking, all the research shows that actually because your brain doesn't really know the difference between real and imagined. Let me say that again. Say that again. Your brain doesn't really know the difference between something that's vividly imagined or something that's real. This is why you have a nightmare and you wake up sweating and you think it's real.
That makes perfect sense and feels like something I should know, but I don't know why. The way you said it, I hadn't actually heard it like that before, and it puts so much in perspective with that. I'm still trying to digest that because your brain is just on response. Is exactly whatever you see in memories that are real, that you visually have, though they were real and lived, you can imagine something completely different. But it's still the same process, there's still visualization, the same as the real thought. I don't know why, but I feel like that's gonna sink in for the next couple of days. This
is why people get so distressed by their thoughts that they go down absolute rabbit holes of catastrophizing things, and they get so stressed out as if it's happening because they're putting themselves through it mentally.
I feel like I need to pay. I feel like I've just established something in my own life. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
So from what you're talking about, I can imagine that's a common issue for a lot of people. How would you deal with that if you were having to help someone suffering from that?
Okay, definitely sort of unpicking what's going on there to begin with, because there'll be some underlying anxiety triggers if someone is doing this. But very much it's about perspective also of your thoughts and what your thoughts are. So something I do quite a lot with people is called diffusing from your thoughts. So there's a lot of talk in sort of mindset work about changing your thinking, changing your thoughts and your perspective. Really important. But also equally as important is that loads of your thoughts are nonsense. And your thoughts aren't facts. They're thoughts. We have like 80,000 of them a day. We have a new thought every 10 seconds or less. And lots of them are just our brain making sense of things coming in from our environment and our senses, our memories, our past, our beliefs, our deepest fears, our worries. And they pop up. And just because we think them doesn't mean that they're true. And our thinking causes people so much distress.
Yeah.
So quite often I do this work with people to be able to diffuse from their thoughts and using techniques like meditation, to be able to observe your thoughts, to be able to actually watch them, to be able to let them go in a way that they no longer cause us distress because we see them for what they are. Random bubbles and bits of information rather than facts. So if we have thoughts that pop up and say, well, that's going to go horribly wrong, or you're going to get hurt, or you're terrible, or you're rubbish, that those critical thoughts are coming from somewhere, and yes, they need to be unpacked where they're coming from. But just because we think it doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean it's real, doesn't mean it's going to happen.
One of the biggest things for me personally to overcome my anxiety was cold water therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I found that silencing the mind more so for me personally than meditation, but the same sort of premise that you were saying.
Yeah. Cold water therapy has so many benefits. I love cold water therapy. Have a lot of cold showers. I like being in the ocean. I love surfing.
Oh, wow.
Because it builds up resilience. If you can put your body and your mind into a state where you're basically, it's quite painful getting in cold water.
It's
It's even worse doing it in the shower because you've got like 1,000 daggers coming onto your back. Whereas at least with cold water, you're just in the water. Because like, if you start your day by fucking yourself that bad, what else is going to fuck you that bad? Nothing. Like you're already winning.
Yeah, definitely. It teaches you to cope. It teaches you to manage, because the way you think about things is so important. Like stress, stress can be really difficult for people, really difficult. Like 90% of illnesses are stress related. But loads of the research actually shows that stress itself isn't the issue. It's how we think about stress and our ability to cope with it.
Do you think as well, from what you're saying, that obviously we're saying it's stress related, but it actually isn't stress related, that we also in society talk about stress in such a bad term, rather than, for example, a dressage horse needs to be under a certain amount of stress to perform at the highest level, and we as performers need a certain level of stress to perform the best we possibly can.
Yeah, we can. We definitely need stress and we need anxiety. And like reframing that a little bit, as you're saying, that there's research, and it's called the Yerkes-Dodson's curve, I believe. And essentially it's a collection of research done, big range of people, different disciplines and sports and everyday life. And anytime you make someone's stress and arousal go up, it peaks at a certain level, and that is directly correspondent to performance. When your stress is highest, your performance is highest.
You said stress and arousal. Is that conjunctive with each other?
It's essentially, from like a biological perspective, arousal is any time your adrenaline and cortisol, etc., spike.
Oh, that's the actual definition of that essentially. Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
So those two, I guess it's because you're almost like hyper vigilant of everything. It's almost like you are really hyper focused of what you're doing, so you're going to be able to perform better.
Yeah, like you need a certain amount of adrenaline in your body. Like if you were going into, let's say you're going eventing and you are chilled and you have no adrenaline, your blood's not going to be up, your reaction speeds are going to be low, your muscles are going to be limp, your pupils aren't going to be dilated, lungs aren't going to be getting enough oxygen in, you're going to be slow. You are not going to be on the ball and you are not going to perform well. You need arousal, whether that comes in the form of anxiety or stress, to make you perform well. So quite often people come to me and they go, I get so stressed, I get so nervous. Sometimes that's a bad thing. We need to get that under control if it's too high. But quite often it's to do with how we think about stress and anxiety and arousal and what it's doing. Because we can reframe it that actually it's improving our performance, that we need it to actually make us on the ball enough to ride well.
Well, yeah, it's almost not just reframing it for the sake of it. Like it's almost coming to that understanding of it is a useful tool in your arsenal. And if you just need to harness it in the right way and have the right education on what it is and why it is, I can give a mainstream context to why that is good. So I'm still with the fire service, which I've been for years, and still I love it, love doing it. And one of the things we have to train in is breathing apparatus. So when we go into a burning building, we essentially have like a big scuba diving tank on, so we can breathe in unbreathable atmospheres essentially. And when there's something we call like drill mode, and we everyone gets every shouted at every so often, like, right, snap out of drill mode, come on, like you've got to rehearse this as if it's a real thing. And we all do it. It's sometimes you enter habit, chuck a set on, we're gonna go train whatever, you'd have a good wear, but it's nothing like the real thing. And then you come to say, when we do training where we implement live fire, and it's not just like a blindfolded test, it's like, no, you're in containers now that are fully on fire. For the training sense, we don't put a real person in there to go and save. It'll be a dummy, for example. But the threat of fire is still really prevalent, and you have to be super focused. And the jump from training in just a blindfold to sort of see in the dark, how are you going to navigate with your partner, to there is fire that I need to actually extinguish and the heat is getting there. And then to one up that, when I have myself gone onto fire calls where it may be a building fire or a high-rise fire, and all of a sudden that it's the adrenaline, that arousal, anxiety, all the rest of it does come into play naturally. But those have been my best BA wares, I'd like to unbiasedly say, compared to my training ones, because that real life scenario, it's funny how your training kicks in key with that spike of anxiety and stress and pressure. And that's almost like where people say training makes perfect, it's not built through luck, is that training should be the subconscious thing, and then let those emotions take the wave, and just being able to control those in the right manner actually allows you to harness that training.
Definitely. Yeah, you need a certain level of stress to perform at your best, no matter what you're doing. And if you're in an emergency situation, then definitely you need it. You're not going to be able to respond if you don't have it.
To people that have listened to this and found that it's resonated with them, and maybe more specifically to guys, I'd like you to speak to them in this regard. But why would you recommend sort of a young equestrian male rider who is facing challenges and adversity to look into therapy? And I aim that more at men, just because of how we said before that it's more female dominated that approach you, and we know the lack of men that do seek therapy because men are known for not talking about feelings. So that's why I say direct that towards sort of a young upcoming male rider.
Yeah, I think it's so important. We have all the messages directed at men that showing emotion is weak and that you can't cry, and you've got to have this front on all the time. And that's what's going to hold you back. It always is. Like, it's normal and it's healthy to show emotion, and you can't suppress it. And this is the thing with emotions, and one of the big things why I went into therapy and not just psychology, is that people tend to think of emotions and feelings as like weaknesses or an abstract concept of, oh yeah, that's just a feeling. No, feelings cause whole changes in our body. If you think any time you get excited, you get like a burst of energy and you want to jump up and down. You get angry, your whole muscles tighten, and you want to punch somebody in the face or swear at them. Emotions change our physiology. And when we suppress them, they don't go anywhere. They tend to just stay inside. And all those emotions build up and they kind of like rot underneath the surface. They like infect us. And unless you speak to somebody, they're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to keep building up until something becomes a problem. Like, it's not a weakness to feel things. It's necessary. We can't just hold them in. Like, actually talking to somebody is so brave. It's really brave. Like, the bravest thing you can do, I think, is to be vulnerable. And that just act of reaching out for help, that in itself, that's going to, in the brain, like, give you oxytocin and make you feel safer and held and supported. Like, you don't have to do everything alone. You really don't.
So, when you say, like, when you hold on to emotions, because I've heard that, I think we've all heard that saying quite a lot, is like, oh, your emotions, if you don't talk about it, they eat you up from the inside. You hold on to it like they're rotting from the inside, etc. That's always just been a saying to me. So, but actually, is that actually a physical thing then? Because if you're saying that your muscles and body and your physiology, your physical state, your physical state reacts to your emotional state.
Yeah.
When we hold our emotions in and we don't discuss that, that literally is that is a fact. It does burn you from the inside out. It physically is doing something.
Yeah, your body remembers. Stuff doesn't just happen in our mind. Our whole nervous system, it's our brain as a control center. but it is, our brain, our spinal column, and the trillions of nerves that come off of that. Everything in the body is linked. It's why people who have been depressed for a long period of time, who have undergone trauma, they have physical pain in their body that is psychological, but it's physical. Like every time you feel scared and your muscles tense up, it becomes a physical reaction.
I had an issue probably about 3-4 years ago where I was sort of the peak of my competition career. I was managing a lot of owners, stress, financial pressures, because I was being paid well to compete horses. And I had a physical breakdown from it. I couldn't control my literally limbs. I was on the floor and the doctors, and my whole body went rigid and I couldn't control my arm movements. I remember I was driving my mum and dad back and I had to pull over and I was rushed into hospital, and it turned out it was all stress induced. I didn't seek therapy then. I carried on. I felt better afterwards. But now, being in therapy, I look at it as offloading. I offload whatever's on my mind and I feel lighter and better for it. And that is why, for me, it's just an amazing thing. For me, it's changed my life.
Yeah.
And made me a better person.
Yeah, I think therapy is such a gift to anyone. It's not something to be ashamed of. Like, I can purely say, if I didn't have therapy in my life, I don't know if I'd be here right now. I was a very, very sad person previously in my life. It does just give you that space. If you're going into a space where you go, this person isn't going to judge me. It's confidential. They're not going to tell anyone. I can be myself to somebody. I can tell them what I'm struggling with, and they can help me understand the things that I don't understand. That is such a gift to give somebody.
Because I'd always feel people around me, I wouldn't maybe want to tell them everything because I'd want to protect them. Whereas with my therapist, I can be 100% open about everything and not feel like, I can't say that. I don't want to upset. I don't want to make someone feel away. So it's someone completely neutral as well. There's no bias. There's no... You're not going to get a bad reaction from whatever you'll say. They're just going to help you sort of learn about yourself and push you in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. And you saying about like not wanting to put anything onto anyone else, I think with men that's an extra, big problem. Like even being like a brother or an uncle or somebody, you tend to think like, I'm the man of the house, or I have certain responsibilities. And I think men do think they have to keep it together for other people and they have to be strong. But you do need to talk to people. Like it literally activates certain regions, reward centers of the brain. Like you need that. We all need to be able to be heard by somebody and to not feel judged. Otherwise, all we're going to do is sit there and judge ourselves.
I think especially now, sort of me and Ash are in our mid-20s, we've now got relationships that are very serious, and there's definitely things that we will talk about between us, and not necessarily to our partners, not because we want to hide it from them, but because for us, we look at that as a way of protecting them from a level of stress that we don't want to then put on them. And that's, I just think like you're correct. It's just sort of a man's way of thinking.
I think it's that, and this is what I don't like, I don't like the narrative of the debate between toxic masculinity and I don't know what the opposite would be to toxic, like soft masculinity, I guess. That's the only thing I think of. That may be wrong. I don't like the narrative of it because I don't feel like the conversation or debate is being had right. It is okay to be a man and be a traditional man, and like we were saying earlier with how like we are hardwired, but if you was purely just that it's not sustainable. Likewise, if you are the other end of that pendulum, it is just not sustainable as well. You need it both in. So I think it's really important to be able to find that balance between where it is, because I say Josh and I are probably very sort of traditional guys. We are very masculine in that sense. We do want to protect, provide, but we also at the same time know that we can't just be that all the time. And I think a lot of that comes down to being who are you're surrounded by and who your buddies are. Because though like I wouldn't used to speak about my emotions, he definitely didn't. But we can check in.
I was so bad.
No, but we can check in with each other, like as guys. And there are some things that as blokes you may not say to your partner because you don't want to put that stress on them. And there's what level of where do you direct certain emotions and stresses. I think it's so important. If you can figure that out, it's that by managing that, it makes you prevail yourself a little bit easier. Just to round it up, this is very, very difficult to put into like keywords, but if a rider wants to optimize, I'll phrase that again without stuttering. If a rider wants to optimize their physical to psychological state, what are the key points to do?
Okay. So if we consider, just in general, to perform well, you do have to be physically fit and you do have to be psychologically fit. And the most important things for someone to have good well-being, you need good well-being to ride a horse, to do any sport, to be elite at anything. You need to have a good relationship with your physical body. So first of all, the basics, nutrition, exercise, addressing anything underlying like maybe body dysmorphia going on. That's really key. You need a good relationship with people around you. You need connection. So you need people that you feel safe with, that you feel heard by, that you feel supported by. That's really important. We all need connection to have good well-being. But you also need a good relationship with yourself. And I think if there are things going on, if you are trying to perform as an athlete or an equestrian, and you think, you're constantly criticising yourself or being down on yourself, then you need to do something about that. And I think that's where sort of reaching out for help, whether that's performance coaching or therapy, would be absolutely key.
Where can people find you, Katie?
So I'm on Instagram as Integrative Sports Coaching. My website is katiepinnisc.com. And I'm on Facebook.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you so much for joining us
Honestly,
today.
it has been an absolute joy. And I just want to just round up with, if you have been listening to this and you are going through some stuff at the moment, please speak to someone. We've sort of said it a couple of times. I've been there personally. You've been there personally.
My DMs are always open.
But also we're not trained professionals, I will say that. But I will link some things in the description that you can go and speak to people if you need urgent attention. Please make sure you find that. And keep listening to the episodes. Leaving it more on a cheery note. Podcast is doing really, really well. I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for all your support. Please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube. We are on Rumble, so if you can't get us on YouTube, check it out on Rumble. Audio's on Apple Music, Spotify, and as we always say, more streaming platforms than we can name. So
do you know what you can also do? If you're cooking and you've got an Alexa, you can say, Alexa, play Rein It In by Ash and Josh, and Alexa will play our podcasts.
there we go. So we want people to tag us in them cooking and playing the Rein It In podcast.
Like that one. Thank you very much for listening, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Take care.